Well, pull up a chair and set a spell here at Tales from SYL Ranch Live, the vlogcast that reminds you to always know where your towel is. And I'm your host, Bill Stone. Hey, Larry, you've got your towel ready? Well, that's good. Won't need it for this episode per se, but might be needing it for some of the commentary I've got. And hey, Captain Jesse, how are you doing tonight? Happy to see you both here. Yes, I am live. So, tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we have the Fandi Masters review of Starship Farragut, the Captaincy. Now, to explain my show, for people who don't come in at the top of the hour, might be watching me in the archives, I do live reviews. Sometimes I do serious films and TV, sometimes I do schlock, and sometimes I do modern films or TV with a broad appeal, like The Orville, which I'm doing. Every Friday until it's over. Usually, however, I stick to a period from about 1900 to 1980 because the period after that is well documented. And 1900 to 1980 contains a lot of science fiction and a lot of science fiction fandom that isn't very well documented. So part of the reason to do the show is to document it. I take any and all questions, comments, and nasty remarks. You can tell me if I missed something, if I'm completely full of crap, or if I'm just an amazingly hoopy frood, which is probably more likely. I go into a lot more depth than most reviewers. I don't just say whether I liked a film or TV show or not. I go into the acting, the direction, the cinematography, some of the mechanics of making a film. And I can do this because a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was once an actor, so I can speak with some authority. Not as much authority as a modern working actor, and I never want to give that opinion. But some authority. As they often say, those who can do, and those who can't teach. Now, tonight's review is a little bit different because I have started reviewing fan films in rather earnest, and I'll be reviewing at least one per month. And today we're going to start with Starship Farragut. Captain Jesse says, I am cold inside the house and have a headache and tired. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Pretty chilly around here as well. I have to tell you, it's pretty damn cold. We got some snow and cold air. But I'm sorry to hear that you've got some stuff. Farragut has some animated episodes too. And oh yes, am I going to review those? I get such a kick out of those because they look exactly like what Filmation would have done if they were making more than one show. It's pretty kind of cool. So I do want to welcome some new subscribers. I hope that you're going to find they subbed today because of my video, Nothing That You See in the Press is Real. Nothing. And I hope you're going to enjoy my reviews. And I promise, if you stick around, I will have some commentary on current events. God, especially today. But I hope you'll enjoy my review content. It is colder outside. Yeah, it's cold inside here. It's cold outside. I do not have my fan on so far. The warmth from the lights is enough to keep me warm. So as a non-spoiler review for this episode, I can say this is a great plot. It is very well written. It has amazing special effects. The acting does vary a bit, but as I'm going to talk about, you have to just kind of get that a pass. The people on this were not professional actors. They were fans who are living out their dreams. And, you know, you can't fault them for that. So having given that very short non-spoiler review, I guess I can give myself a...
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. All hands, prepare for incoming spoilers.
Yes, it is a spoiler alert, and that is because I am a Fandi master, and that means that the fandom is strong with me, and that means that nothing is new, nothing is original, and at worst I figure it out about a half an hour too early. This is not a boast or a brag, this is where you find yourself after having watched, read, and listened to about 100 years worth of science fiction. You just can't see the new stuff for the whole century that came before, and you find out there just isn't much that's new in the world. And a lot of times it interferes with your ability to enjoy things. But that's not the case with this episode whatsoever. Larry asks, is this the very first episode they made? Yes, it is. It can sort of be considered a pilot. They were doing this one, much like other fan films, to see if it could be done. To see if it could be done. They were one of the vanguards for this. They just wanted to see, can this be done? So, the plot on this, I tell you what, I'm not going to go through it. It's a 1-hour episode. If you didn't watch it, I guess that means that you don't care that I'm about to spoil everything about it. And if you did watch it, well, good for you. This is a very, very good episode. Always like to get my cringe moments out of the way. And one of those that I talked about is the acting varies in terms of quality. But again, you just, even as a reviewer, you just forgive it. These are fans living out their dreams. You know, some actors, too, are rather heavy set, especially the Klingons. But again, you have to forgive this. These are fans living out their dreams. If I decided to make a fan film and put myself in it, well, I'm a little bit heavy right now. And I would hope that my experience as an actor would help feed into it, but I don't know at this late date whether it would or not. You just have to give it away. You have to say, that's something we're going to let slide, because these are fans living out their dreams. Where They Before continues, and Phase 2. They were contemporary a bit with Phase 2. We can see that in a cameo that goes on in here. They worked with Phase 2, I think, if I understand correctly. They ultimately sold their sets to Phase 2. However, they were also very heavily involved in Star Trek Continues, and had in one episode a cameo from Vic Mignogna as Captain Kirk, and Vic actually directed at least 2 of their episodes. So, yeah, they were kind of with both. It's kind of interesting. This is the only show where they do cameos from Captain Kirk, but they're the 2 different actors, so that's kind of fun. In terms of great moments, I have to say just mostly everything else. I really like Lieutenant Prescott. I like him a lot. He's heavily involved in this show, both in front of and behind the camera. And there's something that goes on here, not in this particular episode, but a time progression. Because this is a fan film. They cannot make a new episode like every 6 months or every year. They are dependent on their budget. They're dependent on when they can get sets. They're dependent on what they can use. And so, you know, time period tends to vary. So they went at this one from 2007 to, I think, 2015. So there's a time progression in there. And as we go through and we get to the end, you're really going to see how that time progression works. And I like it very much. They also did, as Larry mentioned, Starship Farragut, the animated series, which I will also be reviewing. I've got these hopefully in chronological order. And those came out between those other ones. And as I say, it's like watching Filmation if Filmation had made more than one Star Trek series. It's very cool. Now, to start off with this sucker, oh my God, the writer, the director, and playing Lieutenant Henry Prescott III is Paul Sieber. His IMDb lists multiple individuals that are involved with the story in terms of the script, including John Broughton, who I believe that this is his baby. It may be a combination of his baby and Paul Sieber's. They're both heavily involved. But I'm going to focus on Paul Sieber because he is credited with the story and the screenplay. So what do? That's what you head for. Some other people are credited for story or parts of story, and some are credited for additional bits and pieces. But he looks like his name is on the most of it. So I want my viewers to know, particularly new ones, that I do not always go through and call out people's IMDb's and talk about what they've done in the past. I do that the first time around in a TV series, and then after that, I don't do it. I do it for guest stars and things like that. But for the most part, I'll do this one time. So you're going to hear a lot of this about their IMDb's and what they've done, but that isn't something you're going to hear every week. So, Paul Sieber's IMDb runs 2005 to present. He has 35 acting credits, 1 in post, 2 filming, and 8 episodes of Star Trek New Voyages. He also has 3 producer credits, which include 3 episodes of Starship Farragut. He is the associate producer on this one, and he also produced 2 episodes of the animated series, which I think is all they made, but I have to check. He also is producer on 1 episode of Star Trek New Voyages called Katoomba, which is one of my favorite episodes of that series. Katoomba is very good. He also has 1 director credit, which is for this episode, The Captaincy. And like everyone else on here, he's won no awards. Most of the time, the people that worked on this show really just worked on this show and some other fan films, and so weren't really up for Oscars or Emmys or things like that. Although sometimes I think they should have been. Now, again, he did a lot of stuff, writing, directing, and acting in this. I would say certainly his writing is very good. The writing is very good. It follows a very traditional 4-act structure for television. They shot this as if it was a 1960s TV show with commercial breaks. And so what you do with that kind of format is pretty simple. They do it all the time. It's just sort of a requirement because of the medium. You have your teaser, the stuff that comes before your opening titles and then the opening titles. And the teaser is something where you want to grab the viewer. You want to say to the viewer, we've got something exciting going on. Please stay with us through the next commercial. That's the whole point. Get the viewer to stay through the next commercial in the 1960s and also broadcast television now. You want to keep the viewer through the commercial because you don't want to lose the audience. So after that, you get 4 acts, and the first 3 are very simple. You start out with something kind of slow, and then build up, build up, build up until you have sort of a small climax that grabs the viewer and hopefully holds them over through the next commercial so they're not flipping channels on you. Do the same thing with the next act, and then the final act. You do a lot of building up. You start here and you build up, build up, build up, build up, build up, build up until you get to a very high point. Do something exciting and have a big climax, and hopefully the audience goes away feeling very satisfied. And if that sounds like I'm talking about sex to some extent, yes, I am. There is a lot of similarities. It's very interesting. I know people who have done papers on that. But yes, there are a lot of similarities, and that's why we use the word climax when it comes to doing something exciting that will give the viewer a good feeling when they walk away from the episode. So he certainly has that here. It's very well executed. I cannot fault his writing at all. I think it's very good. It gives us a good story that, frankly, the first time I watched it, this was not the first time I'd seen it before. In fact, this episode was why I didn't give it as much attention as I am now, because of some of the cringe stuff, the acting and things like that are kind of, vary a lot. But the story itself, great. I like what he's put in it. I think that it's exciting for the most part, particularly the end, when we get to that big climax and the audience walks away feeling very satisfied. His direction is very good here. What you have to understand always with fan films, particularly this one, they have an extremely limited budget. And they made very, very good use of that very limited budget. The direction is very competent. It is in some ways similar to shots that you would see in the original series. But at the same time, it has a few things in it that are a little bit unique. There's when the captain and the first officer and the engineer are all discovering that there's this giant cloaking device that's covering a whole mountain, and the camera starts in on one of them, slides over to the next, and they're all just staring, rather gaping at this giant structure that they're seeing. I thought that was pretty creative. So good direction. I like his direction. In terms of his performance, well, this character, oddly enough, if you check Memory Beta, which is the repository of non-canon Star Trek, and this could be canon. You could fit this into canon if you want to. He is a fourth-generation Starfleet officer. His captain, because they talk about Prescott, his father, and I wasn't sure where that came from. But according to Memory Beta, his captain, Henry F. Prescott Jr., was killed in action during Star Trek's the first episode of the 5-year mission, Where No Man Has Gone Before. I don't know if we see that on screen or not. All I know is that's what they seem to be alluding to. Maybe it was something that non-canon happened, or maybe he was just a minor character who got killed. I don't know. But he is a fourth-generation Starfleet officer. And in terms of his performance, again, this is one of the ones where it is a little bit iffy. I understand what he's playing, a very uptight, kind of always by-the-book guy. And to his credit, he's usually right. But at the same time, it occasionally seems either a little much or too little. Now, I have to tell you that as he goes along, as this series progresses, again, you kind of have to think of this as a pilot. They were seeing if this could be done. And so his performance gets much, much better over the course of the series, and in the most recent episode they've done, which is supposed to be not the last episode. Supposedly they are in pre-production for a final episode, which would involve crowdfunding. Although with the new fan film regulations, I'm not sure how they could do that. But there is another one supposed to come out. So I give him, he's good. He's not great here, but he has a lot of potential, and by the end we really see it. He is really there. And I think that's why he moved into other more legitimate acting stuff besides just fan films. He did a lot of fan film work, as did everybody on this thing, but he moved out of kind of, the fan film, I'm living out my dreams, and more into traditional acting. So I think he's doing very good. Then, as Captain John Carter, we have John Broughton. Okay, I think, judging from what I see, this was his baby. If it wasn't just his baby, it was his baby and Paul Sieber's baby. I'm not sure which. I am not somebody who's got the background to know, but it sure looks like this show is John Broughton's baby. His IMDb goes 2007 to 2016. Again, I've talked about the golden age of Star Trek fan films, and this falls right into it. He has 6 costume and wardrobe credits, 1 for Trek Isolation. Didn't know about that one. Now on my list of things to review for Star Trek fan films, he also has 8 episodes of Starship Farragut and 2 episodes of Star Trek Continues, including Lolani, which is, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek Continues. So that's pretty cool. Yes, Larry says I should mention that. His name comes from Edgar Rice Burroughs' Mars novels, or as Burroughs called them, the Barsoom series of novels, because the inhabitants of Mars call Mars Barsoom. And the main protagonist is a man from Earth whose name is John Carter. So this is sort of an in-joke by producing a character named John Carter, who is straight out of there. So yes, Larry. I've also mentioned before, they did an adaptation of the first novel in that series, which is A Princess of Mars, and called it just John Carter, in I think 2012. It did not do well at the box office, and I think that was largely because by that time, virtually everything that we saw on screen in John Carter, we had seen before. In some type or another, we had seen that kind of thing in science fiction movies, and audiences just weren't impressed. If it had come out 10 years earlier, I think it would have probably done a lot better at the box office. Now, Broughton also has 4 producer credits. Trek Isolation. Again, I got to go put it on my list. 8 episodes of Starship Farragut. 3 episodes of Star Trek Continues, including, again, Lolani, one of my favorite episodes. He has 2 writer credits, 7 of which are for Starship Farragut. He has 3 actor credits, 8 episodes of Starship Farragut, 1 episode of Trek Isolation, and, of course, 2 episodes of Starship Farragut, the animated series, which I'm really looking forward to. I've watched them, and, for me, it's a pushback to my childhood. It is the sort of animation you would have seen Filmation doing at the time. Today, if you were going to do it, it would be totally different. But with the limited animation they had and the limited budget and all that, this is a wonderful homage to what Filmation was doing. And in point of fact, when we get to it, we will discover that not only did Vic Mignogna do voices for it, not only did Chris Doohan do voices for it, but they actually got Norm Prescott to do voices for it. Broughton has 2 director credits, one for Trek Isolation and another one for Fanatical, which I don't know what is. If it's some kind of fan film, I will put it on my docket to review. And like everyone else, he just doesn't have any awards. And again, it's not because of his performance or anything like that. It's because this show was never up for those kind of awards. His production, because he's producer. The production on this, I have no idea what the budget was. It was limited, as all fan films are limited budget. You do not get $3 million an episode to do what you got. You crowdfund or you fund it out of your own pocket. So it had a limited budget. Larry Lewis says, I'm wanting to go on that Farragut Bridge with my blue Science Officer Series uniform and sit at the science station. Yeah, I got a little bit of that, talking about some of the production aspects of that momentarily. Now, in terms of profit, well, there's none. They get no profit. Profit is forbidden by CBS Paramount, so they get any profit. They did generally use exceptional use of their limited budget. There are places where I have objections to it, and I'll talk about that, but they used extremely good use of the limited budget. And apparently they built their own sets and later sold those sets to Star Trek New Voyages Phase 2. Now, I'm not sure what happened after that. Did they start using the Star Trek Continues sets? I don't know. But the later direction and appearances by Vic Mignogna make me think that this may be the case, that they started using those sets. In terms of costumes, again, he's got his name on costumes. We'll talk about costumes. You see this all the time with fan films. You don't have a single individual because you have a limited budget. It's not like a motion picture or a television show where you go out and you hire people to do it. It is somebody's labor of love, and they are doing a lot of work. Everybody does a lot of work. Even when I'm calling people out, you're still not seeing all the work that they are doing. It takes a lot of work, a lot of effort to put this together, and particularly to put this together in a way that looks like original Star Trek. So when we come to the uniforms, well, the costumes here are great. The Klingon costumes look exactly like the Klingon costumes as we saw in Star Trek, the original series. The uniforms that the Starfleet officers are wearing are exactly like the costumes we saw in the original series. And in fact, for several women, they use something that we only saw once or twice on Star Trek, and only in passing, and that is a female tunic and pants uniform. Believe it or not, they actually had them. We just never saw them. They always hired actresses with great legs. And Roddenberry was something of a sexist, and so he liked to put those women into miniskirts. However, there was a tunic and pants uniform. We see them a lot here. Part of that is the weight of the actors. There are people who can support, a miniskirt and their legs. And there are people who can't. And so the choice to go with that was very, very good. And it showed us, hey, you know, we really do have these uniforms that you only saw in passing in Star Trek, the original series. I very much like, if you see in the picture here, I very much like that they have correctly figured out that at that time period, every ship in Starfleet had its own chest insignia. And so they have come up with a chest insignia for the USS Farragut. So I like that very much. The costumes are very, very good. They are exactly what we would have expected to see in Star Trek, the original series. Then Michael Bednar as Commander Robert Taggett. He is also cinematographer, did some work on props, and did visual effects with miniatures. So, interestingly enough, I went to look him up, and this is not the greatest picture in the world, but I got it off his IMDb because I found out when I was looking that his day job is he is an IT wonk like myself. So I sent him a message saying, hey, I'm reviewing your show tonight. It'd be really cool if you popped in. So, Michael, if you happen to be out there, you know, tell me when I'm missing something. You were behind the scenes and I was not. I really hope he's there, but my guess is he may not have gotten that from IMDb. I'm not IMDb, but I mean LinkedIn. That's where I got his information. His IMDb presently goes 2007 to 2015 with 6 art department credits, which translates one of those into 7 episodes of Starship Farragut and then 4 other fan films. William Wyndham had a cluster type insignia on his uniform. Yes, he did. They all had different ones. Even Star Trek Enterprise knew to do that. The Defiant had its own insignia. And if you look at the insignia that's worn by the people on the USS Antares in the episode Charlie X, those are different. Starfleet Command officers have a different sort of starburst one. So, yeah, they all had different ones, and it's very cool that he was able to do that. Now, Bednar also has 5 producer credits for Starship Farragut and also producer credits on Star Trek Continues. He also has 3 acting credits, Starship Farragut, obviously, including the animated series, of course, and another film that I've got to do, Project Potemkin. He also has 1 director credit for Dreadnought Dominion. I don't know if that's Star Trek or not. Every time I run across these, somebody's involved in other fan films, and I go, oh my God, I've got another one to do. I'm going to keep doing fan films probably for years at this rate. Captain Jesse asks, do I think that Discovery Season 2 is trying to tie in the Iconians to the Discovery universe? I doubt that they even know the Iconians exist. Star Trek STD is dead. They barely know anything about Star Trek. The only thing I can say positive about them in terms of tying stuff in is they did know enough about the about the Pike era to mention, for example, that there are only 203 people aboard the Enterprise at that time, because in the cage, Pike says that he has 203 crew members. So at least they do that, but I doubt they know the slightest bit about Iconians. They have almost no knowledge of Star Trek canon, which is why I always say STD, whether the people doing it or not, no, it is in an alternate universe. Screw you. So Michael Bednar's performance as JT, that is Commander Robert Taggett, RT rather, I like his performance. It is, again, not the greatest performance, but it is not bad. It is not bad. It kind of varies, but again, you can think of this as a pilot, and it's being run by fans who are living out their dreams by doing a ton of work in order to get this to work. I will never fault them for their acting skills. They are not professionals, and they get better as they go along. They keep getting better. By the end, I totally buy these guys. The last episode in particular, wow, I really buy them. His cinematography, he's the cinematographer on this one. Well, you know, I always say it, my regular viewers will get bored, But I always say the best thing, if you have some kind of collaboration between your director and your cinematographer. Your director says, I want this shot. The cinematographer says, well, we can get that shot, but what if we just flip things around? What if we got a slightly different camera angle so that we make it a little more dramatic? What if we lit it a little differently? In this case, I have no idea. Now, when you're dealing with a fan film, you're dealing with a limited number of people, and so you hope that there is going on that type of collaboration. If there wasn't, people would want to kill each other, and you wouldn't have the fan film. So I have to fall back, as always, on the two standbys. Did you know what you were supposed to look at, and could you see what you were supposed to see? And the answer is yes, you definitely could. And I think he made some pretty good use of some of the cramped quarters that they have when I get to the production design in some place. But I think the cinematography is fine here, and it works very well. Larry says, blood, sweat, and tears, and lots of love for Star Trek went into this production. Yes, yes. Anytime you do this, anytime you do anything like this, it is taking you tons of time, and you have a limited, fantastically limited budget, and you're dealing with people, again, who are not professional actors, and for that matter, people behind the scenes. They're people you know. I mean, really, that's what happens here. You find people that you know, anybody you can find, people that are friends, that are fans, and you'll see that in one character. People that are friends, people that are fans, people who will go, oh, that would be so cool to be involved in that. And as Larry says, they put blood, sweat, and tears and lots of love for Star Trek into this. And that's why this show is as good as it is. And will keep getting better as we go through the remainder of the episodes. Even the animated series. They did stuff in the animated series just like they did in Star Trek, the animated series in the 1970s. Again, and they have voices by Vic Mignogna and by Chris Doohan and by Norm Prescott himself. Late Norm Prescott, he's now passed away, but they got him there. They got him there. I recognized his voice instantly because he would occasionally, on Star Trek, the original series, he would occasionally do voices for that because then they didn't have to pay an actor because they were operating under a limited budget. So if Norm Prescott did an occasional voice, they didn't have to pay him. But I recognized his voice, and I went, no way. Norm Prescott, watch the credits. There he is. Very cool stuff. As you say, Larry, blood, sweat, and tears. Now, Michael Bednar is also on props. He's listed on props. I have to say, again, props are great. The phasers, communicators, tricorders, Klingon disruptor weapons, everything looks exactly the way it did in Star Trek, the original series. They were either renting those or recreating them perfectly, and that all worked great. It always just worked great. He's also limited as having something to do with miniatures. Now, this one I have to get a lot of credit for because there's lots of CGI in this one, and my God, the CGI is great. There's lots of CGI in this one, and to me, the best thing, the best kind of credit I can give this is where there are miniatures versus CGI, I have no idea. I do not know which is which, and that is the mark of really good miniature. If you can't tell that there's a miniature there instead of some CGI in this day and age, that's great. That's great. So whatever he did on miniatures, I have to give him a lot of credit for. Excuse me, my chair is falling down again. Donate to me. I need a better chair. So that's my review for him. Very good stuff. Then we have Holly Bednar as Lieutenant Commander Michelle Mike Smithfield. They call her Mike. Guess what, guys? Michael Burnham is not the first person to be called Mike, although in this case it is a nickname for Michelle, but we never hear her called that. She is Mike. Now she has Holly Bednar. I would have to assume that she was Michael Bednar's wife, particularly by the time you get to the end of the series, some things that happened there. Not the end, the last episode to date. So I think she was probably his wife. Again, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and people you know, and people that want to do a project like this and are living out their dreams. God knows, if I had the slightest opportunity to be involved in a Star Trek fan film, I'm there in a heartbeat. Anybody making a Star Trek fan film, please feel free to call me. I would love to be a cameo as an admiral, or hell, you can make me the captain of the ship, and I will lose that 30 pounds that I need to lose in order to do that for you. Larry says, sometimes you have to make a miniature to create a CGI object. Maybe that was what was going on. I have no idea. All I know is, if that was happening, I couldn't tell. I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't tell. So Holly Bednar has an IMDb that goes 2007 to 2016. Hang on a second. I want to move something so that my semi-attempt at a teleprompter is a little better. She's got an IMDb that runs 2007 to 2016 with 2 acting credits, one of which translates into 7 episodes of Starship Farragut and 2 episodes of Starship Farragut, the animated series. She has 2 producer credits, one of which is for 7 episodes of Starship Farragut and 3 episodes of Star Trek Continues, the vignettes. As I say, we got some crossover here. Started out with Star Trek Phase 2 and New Voyages, and crossed over into, very, very much crossed over into Star Trek Continues, which is what makes me think if they sold their sets to Star Trek New Voyages Phase 2, maybe they were starting to use the Star Trek Phase 2, Star Trek New Voyages sets. I don't know. I have no idea what was going on in that, and I wish Michael were around to tell me. Michael, if you're ever watching and in the archives and you want to, chime in the comments to tell me all about how this show was made, I certainly would like to. And as I always say, if you want to pay me some fair amount of money so that I have the money to do it, and if you could maybe get some publisher to give me an advance so I have the money to do it, I will go around the country. I will go to everybody who's ever made a fan film. I will sit down and talk to them, and much like the making of Star Trek in the 1960s by Stephen Whitfield, I will make the definitive work on how this was put together. And I am a good writer, by the way. So she also has 1 writer credit for Starship Farragut for the episode Just Passing Through, which we will review later. Her performance, as I say, this is one where it varies a little bit. Sometimes she's great, sometimes it's a little iffy, but again, I do not fault these guys for their performances, ever. They are fans living out their dreams. Call me. Maybe I'll be good because I have some experience as an actor, and maybe I won't be so good. It's been a long time. So call me and I will do my best, my very best. And she is doing her very best, giving it her all. And there are going to be episodes that are directed by Vic Mignogna where everybody is really good, because Vic Mignogna, as a professional and a professional actor, knows how to say to people who are not, here's what you need to do to bring a little more realism, a little more authenticity to your character. And when that happens, it all just works really well. Not that it's working badly here. I think the chemistry between the 3 leads is very good. These are people who obviously know each other in real life. Otherwise, they wouldn't be making this film together. But it still works very nicely, and even when she's maybe a little not quite as authentic as she might be, there are other moments when she is. One of the things I really like about her, one of the things I really like is a choice that they made. You know, a lot of times in Star Trek, whether it's any incarnation of it, they do what they always do. They take female hair and they dress it up to look really nice and, you know, good and well coiffed. Here they have taken her and they have, I think intentionally, done her hair a little bit messier, which is great. That is great. That tells us something about the character. Tells us this is a character who is used to being a, you know, monkey wrench type of person involved in engineering and really doesn't care about her hair very much. This is something who is involved in her craft, in what she does as an engineer, and her hair is not that important. I love that. I love that. She stands out from everybody else because of it, and I think that was a great choice. Larry says, a Klingon headpiece would fit nice on me. Well, believe it or not, I've done that twice. The first time was when I went to see Star Trek III, The Wrath of Khan. It was not a full Klingon headpiece. I made an appliance that basically just covered this general area because I didn't have the wherewithal at the time. But the funny thing was, we go to this film, and it was a bunch of us Star Trek fans sitting down front, and I've mentioned it in previous shows. When the Enterprise exploded, it was such a dramatic moment because it had never been done before. It was a complete surprise, and we were all horrified. I was sitting next to a girl who'd been standing with me in line, and she just grabbed my hand. It was so powerful. She's like, oh, my God, hold my hand. This is terrible. As that movie started, as it started up, there were some kids behind us who were making a lot of noise. And here I am in a Klingon costume from the original series and this forehead piece. And I turned around to them and I said, you will be silent. And they both just got scared and shut up. The next time I did it, I had bought something from the store and I don't remember what it was. It was not a Klingon headpiece, but if you did it right, it looked like one. And I went to a couple of conventions. And then I got older and I realized I don't want to go through that amount of effort. It was hard and time-consuming to put those on to make it look realistic. But if somebody else is doing the makeup for me and I can sit there, that would be perfectly fine. Every engineer would be compared to Scotty. Yes, absolutely. But again, for her, I think, you know, not making her hair so coiffed is a really nice choice for her. It tells us, okay, this is somebody who just doesn't care. She's in this for, you know, for her job, which I really like. And she's also one of those characters who gets a tunic and pants uniform. Again, I understand that choice because of the age and the figure of that actress. Not to say that she's not attractive. At my age, I do find her attractive. But you can't support that miniskirt forever. You know, there's very few people who can do that. So having that tunic and pants uniform, I think, was great. You know, and again, for an engineer, really, are you going to be running up Jeffrey's tube in a skirt? You know, I mean, that's silly. Pants and a tunic is great. And they recreated it perfectly because it isn't the tunic that goes up to the neck. It's the same thing where we see that, you know, the tunic, it kind of goes down on one side and then back up on the chest, and they recreated that perfectly. So yay for the costumes on that one. Now, in terms of Commodore Broughton, I'm going to talk about him just a bit. He has a lot of stuff he did in various things. I couldn't find a picture of him, and I didn't want to grab one out of the episode because he was all messed up for the most part and, you know, hard to see. Because they did intentionally light the Klingon sets kind of dark. But John Broughton Sr. Oh, let us just guess. You know, if John Broughton is the commander of the ship, let us just imagine who John Broughton Sr. probably is. Despite that, he is another guy who was putting blood, sweat, tears, and love into this episode. Larry says, the young lady engineer in Firefly TV series was the same, always messy and working on the edges. Yes, and that's what they're doing here. That's what they're doing here with her. She just isn't that into making her hair look great. She is doing her job, and it gets messy, and it, you know, she's not well coiffed, and I like that. As I said, John Broughton Sr., though he's playing Commodore Broughton in this, his own name. He's playing the Commodore in this, but he is also putting blood, sweat, tears, and love of Star Trek into this. You know, my father, before he passed away, he liked Star Trek. He liked, you know, science fiction in general, but he wasn't the huge fan of Star Trek that I was. I always thought, you know, if we were going to do something like this, it would be kind of cool. You know, if he was the same level of fan as I was. And here we have that. I think here we have that. His IMDb is 2007 through 2016 with two decorator credits, set decorator, I'm sorry, for Trek Isolation and 5 episodes of Starship Farragut. He also has 2 art department credits that translate into Starship Farragut, and also Star Trek Continues, again, Lolani, one of my favorite episodes of that series. Super Crew 63, nice to see you here tonight. You say, I have watched all of the Starship Farragut series, and it is fun to watch. The acting is fair, especially considering it's a fan film. You've seen worse in A movies. Yeah, that's true. There are worse actors in, you know, released films. There's no question about that. But one thing about these actors is their performances get better and better and better as they go along. By next episode or the third, I'm not even worried about it anymore. It isn't something I criticize. And particularly when Vic Mignogna starts directing. Because I think he really knows, as a professional, he can say, do this. You know, he may or may not be a method actor. I have no idea. Probably to some extent he is. So he can say to them, you know, here's what you're trying to do. What is your motivation? Here is your motivation at this particular moment in time, and play it that way, you know, and you know, help get some more genuineness into the performance. But they're not doing bad. Don't get me wrong. They're not doing bad. If I had to criticize anything in general, it is this. Non-professional actors don't use their voices to as much effect as they could. You know, they tend to be a little bit flat in terms of how they use their voices. Frankly, when I'm doing this show, I am aware of how I'm doing it. I'm not doing it on purpose necessarily, but you can hear my voice going up and down. And novice actors tend to be a little more flat, and you're seeing that a little bit here. It's not bad, as Super Crew says, seen worse in other movies, even ones released in theaters. But if I had to criticize anything in particular, I would say, use your voice more. Go up, go down. When you're surprised, go up. When you're, you know, delivering some bad news, go down. You know, don't stay flat there. Get his name. John Broughton Sr. also has an actor credit for 2 episodes of Starship Farragut, and he has also acted in a number of other fan films. I'm not going to list them all because, frankly, there's a lot. Again, this is a guy, blood, sweat, tears, and love, putting into this and other fan films that he's been involved in. Again, the sort of thing, you know, where when my dad was alive, you know, considering what John Broughton, who was playing the captain, and his father, it would have been kind of fun, you know, if we'd both been the same level of fan and could put our blood, sweat, and tears into a project like this. So I sort of envy them. Then there is the category of everybody else. There are a ton of people who are listed in the acting credits for this one. Just a ton. You know, you have the entire bridge crew. You have all these Klingons. And I don't have Krug in here for some reason. I don't know why I didn't use Krug. Commander Krug is in this. And he certainly seems, from the way they talk about him, as if he's Commander Krug from Star Trek 3. And there's every indication that he probably is. And he's done as a classic original series Klingon rather than a ridged Klingon, which I agree with. Original series, we did not see these forehead ridged Klingons. I am perfectly happy to imagine that maybe whatever that virus was, you know, he got cured of it and got ridges on his forehead or something like that. But using him here without that, I think is great. Well, hey, Marshall, glad to see you here tonight. I'm not going to start over. I'm into the production now. Sorry that you've been swamped, but, feel free to watch everything in the archives. So we have a lot of people. I wish now, I don't know. I know what happened. I duplicated one person inside of my IMDb, and then my notes, and then I did not go back and do Krug. I should have. He plays other characters. He plays other characters in the series as well. But again, making him a non-ridged Klingon, I think, is perfectly fine for this show. I have no problem with that. Canonically, you might say, okay, well, that virus they had, some Klingons got, fixed. So, I have no problem with that. And I think he's fine there as Commander Krug. He's got one line that I really like. And what are your names? Oh, I forgot. I don't care. Very funny line that I liked. Captain says, what's new, Bill? Well, for me personally, not a hell of a lot. I'm working out a lot more. I am attempting to lose this 30 pounds I've got and help get my diabetes a little bit more under control via some more exercise. So I've got a membership in a local health club, and I'm going there pretty much daily. Larry says, I found 7 bits of Captaincy on YouTube. I don't know if they combine to equal the whole film. I tried to put down, I believe it's 7 parts. I tried to put down last week a playlist that had them all in order, because they are tough to find on YouTube if you're doing it by yourself. Marshall says, 3 cheers for retconning the retconned retcon with another retcon. We are all members of the retcon proliferation front. Join today. Yes, again, no problem with making Krug a non-ridged forehead Klingon. No problem with that whatsoever. So that was cool. In the category of everybody else, well, the first thing that comes to mind is that James Cawley, Jeffrey Quinn, and John M. Kelly make brief appearances of this as Kirk, Spock, and McCoy from Star Trek New Voyages Phase 2. As I said, this one is a little odd because they start out having some association with Star Trek New Voyages, and they sold their sets to them. And then they started, I think, doing their work on the sets for Star Trek Continues. And that's why we see Vic Mignogna. The first time that Vic Mignogna plays Kirk, he gets a big-ass introducing credit. It's at the end of the credits, it says, introducing Vic Mignogna as Captain Kirk, right there on a whole card. I think maybe that was the first time he actually did it. And he also directed at least 2 episodes of their show. So, very strange thing. And again, I would really like it if somebody from this production were to, because I did mention I had one, Michael Bednar, who is an IT guy in real life. I tried to contact him on LinkedIn and asked him if he would come in and be a part of the audience and tell me things, because I don't know. I don't know. I am telling you my review, but when we get into things like the production aspects of it, I'd have to be there to know specifically. I'm giving you my educated guess, and that is all. Larry says, original series Klingons are fine. Star Trek the Motion Picture Klingons were anomalies. And as always, I say it every time, man, you give somebody a giant ridge on their forehead, it cuts off half of their face, and so they can only emote through this part here. And what tended to happen with Klingons because of that, Klingons in the original series had pretty normal voices. Kor in Errand of Mercy, his voice is partly why he is so menacing. And Klingons post-Ridge turned into growling Klingons, batlets and all that. They just growled a lot, as opposed to, Kor, who was pretty damn menacing just because of his voice. So I never approved of that from an acting perspective, and nor from what voices turned into. They all just started to growl. So we have those cameos, and there are a ton of others. The end titles are just filled with stuff. IMDb is filled with stuff. There are a couple of other cameos in there by other people. You go look it up. You go look it up. I can't do it. It's just so many people. Larry says, Worf is the only one who could emote through his makeup. One of the very few. Yeah, you have to be pretty damn talented to be able to do that. And that's why the poor bastards on Discovery can't do a thing. They're totally covered. Teeth appliances. They can't even speak Klingon through the damn things. Kur did pretty good. Yeah, he did pretty good after he got his forehead ridge in Deep Space Nine. But I still think he's a hell of a lot more menacing without it. He is just nasty looking and sounds nasty looking. A line I will never forget. I can't do it because I'm not John Colicos. But he's threatening Kirk. He's going, I think we'll use our mind sifter. Now imagine you dead, your friend, a vegetable. Is that what you really want? You know, just totally menacing just by being quiet. And it's John Colicos. I cannot do him. I cannot ever do it that part as well as he did. Marshall Presley says Hugo Weaving should play all the Klingons in Discovery. He can emote as V. Klingons would be a breeze. Yeah. Hugo Weaving could probably do that. Guy could make a performance with a red skull. You know, even though some of it's CGI and you got movement, it was still a good performance. Yes, Supercrew 63 also liked Kang, always liked Kang. Another guy who could be menacing with his voice. He'd be menacing all the way around because that actor was really good at playing heavies in the first place. And so playing a Klingon was not a big stretch for him. And he was menacing. And when he showed up in that episode of Voyager with a big forehead piece, I did not think he was nearly as menacing. I think Klingons are better when they... I mean, in the Enterprise episode where they got in the brig, those sick Klingons, who had no forehead ridges and just long hair, those guys were more menacing to me. I think it's better if you don't have that headpiece for Klingons. There it says, Colicos was a great villain in Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica. Yeah, Battlestar Galactica, he allowed himself to chew the scenery just a little bit more, but it totally fit. He was perfect. John Colicos was a great actor, just a great actor. So moving into production. This was one of the things I really liked. Music. The score for this is by John Seguin. His IMDb is 2007 because he has 2 composer credits for this episode and also for something called Hey Shipwreck. I hope it's not another Star Trek fan film that I've got to add to my list. This episode has an original score throughout. He does occasionally take themes from Star Trek: The Motion Picture and from Alexander Courage's, but it is still an original score. Now, admittedly, he did not have like a 72-piece orchestra to work with. Some of the music does sound like it's coming from something that's synthesized and attempting to sound like it, but he did an original score. We don't see that a lot. Original scores for a film like this. Again, blood, sweat, tears, and a lot of love for Star Trek went into this. Marshall President says, Klingons in Star Trek have variable geometry genetics, which leads one to ask, who exactly designed the Voyager warp wings? Well, that is a whole other problem. I don't think that was a great idea. I understand what they were trying to do, but, what happens if somebody fires on the hinges for those wings? What happens? Can you still go to warp or are you blown? But while I didn't dislike exactly Voyager's design, I don't think anybody has ever designed a starship any better than Matt Jeffries did for the original Enterprise. I think everything after that, particularly when you start to get into this, shapes that are like arrows or things like that in the primary hull, no, it's better with the shapes and designs that he did. He knew what he was doing. They flap back at the attacker, Marshall says. The wings on the Discovery. Yeah, whatever. I don't like that. But again, we had an original score here. Yay, yay, yay. And the opening titles I really like very much. I think the music for the opening titles goes along very well. And we will see in later episodes where that is, in fact, either turned into something that is a little better in terms of sounding more like musical instruments, or they actually recorded musical instruments for the score. We will see that happening. They showed a starship landing on a planet in Star Trek Voyager. Sure, yeah, and that makes sense. That's a small enough ship that you could probably do that. I don't have any problem with that per se. It's just, like I say, those warp wings. I mean, what if you blow the hinges off? What happens then? Can you go to warp still? Who knows? And again, I don't think the design for any Star Trek ship has ever matched what Matt Jefferies did for the original Enterprise. Maybe a slight change with the sloped back warp nacelles in Star Trek: The Motion Picture and those era movies might be slightly better, but it's still going off a design that is very well crafted, and nobody has ever done a better one. Supergroup 63 says, several times, I always liked that it looked awesome with the backgrounds they had. Yes. In this episode, they're great. They're just good. The special effects they have are good. One thing I would mention, let me get to the special effects and I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it then. So, props. Well, they're attributed to a number of people. Michael Bednar. Again, you get stuff going on like this where a lot of people do multiple things. You don't have professionals to hire as prop people. You get a lot of people doing a lot of things, pouring their blood, sweat, and tears into something they really love. Marshall says the original Jefferies design followed the golden mean, a math ratio to a fault. Yes, I'd forgotten the name of that when I was trying to talk about it, but you are absolutely right. It was intentional, and it was following that stuff, and that's why that ship looks as attractive as it does. And no one will, when they screw with that design too much, you just, no, it doesn't work well. So Bednar was in this. I did him already. The other person on props is Dennis Steins, who has IMDb that goes 2007 to 2016, with 2 art department credits that include 2 episodes of Star Trek New Voyages, including Mind Sifter, one of my favorite episodes because it is an adaptation of a short story by a fan, a big name fan. So awesome on that one. I like that one. He also has 3 Starship Farragut ones that he did, and he does he has one set director credit also for Starship Farragut. Marshall says that's why the Enterprise A looks as good. Probert did the same thing. Yeah. In terms of the main changes that they made there with the sloped back, warp nacelle pylons, I like that slightly better than the original because it gives the impression of wings, of an eagle's wings or something like that. When the ship is flying forward, it looks like it's eagle's wings. So I like that. I like that, and it's maybe slightly better than the original. But, when you screw it with it too much, when you make the front of the ship, an arrow pointing forward, when you squash it down so it's not, the connecting dorsal is too small. I don't think it looks very good. And particularly, I really did hate the Enterprise D. I really did hate it. I thought it looked like a duck. I did not like the design of that ship at all. And Marshall mentions the nacelle struts also followed it. The 1.6 rise over 1 run. Yes. It was very intentional, and it made the ship look very good. And that's why we get into things like this, where they're doing great special effects and keeping the design of that ship, making it a different sister ship. Looks great. It looks great. I did pretty much already talk about the props. They're wonderful. They look exactly like original series props in every single respect, down to the Klingon disruptors, the tricorders, the phasers, that phaser rifle. Now, I am unclear where the design of that phaser rifle actually originated, because we see it used over and over in various fan films. So I'm not sure who came up with that first. But we are seeing it here. It makes perfect sense. Yay. All right. I think, however, if I were doing it, I would look at more at what Matt Jeffries was designing for phasers, because his intention was, we have the phaser 1. I can't take it out because I don't have that good a phaser. You have the phaser 1 that snaps into your phaser 2, right? And the intention with this too, by the way, Jeffrey's intention, you can see it in some early episodes. This thing here, this rolling thing, is not to set the setting of the phaser. It's to roll up a little thing that is an aiming mechanism. And so when you put it into a phaser like this, the same thing is supposed to happen. It's your aiming mechanism. It's your sighting mechanism. The other one is probably what was intended to actually change the phaser thing. And then when you get into your phaser 2, you also have this control for, controlling how it is. His intention was that probably the phaser 2 would then go into a phaser 3, like a rifle. So you'd have your phaser 2 up here with the, with your sighting mechanism, and then the rest of it like this. I would kind of like to see that done. But, the one they came up with is fine. And again, I don't know where that originated, because I've seen it in multiple fan films now, and I'm not sure where it comes from exactly. But it's still a good design. Marshall says, is it the rifle design from the original series Where No Man Has Gone Before, or the Cage? No, it's not. It's not at all. It looks like original series era phaser rifle, not like the one that we saw in Where No Man Has Gone Before at all. It looks like something you could expect. It's got this same color. It's got some of the same lines. It's just, if you look at the designs that Jeffries originally came up with, it really was intended to snap into something like this. So that you'd have a rifle that was more like, can't do it that side, a rifle that was more like this, with this being the front grip for it. And the aiming mechanism, the sighting mechanism, people don't know this. The original series favorite phasers, there's a little rectangular thing here. That was not supposed to be for firing the phaser. If you look at the original props, the firing button is on the bottom. But it will not fire unless you use this to roll up your sighting mechanism. That is its safety mechanism. Because obviously a button on the bottom is going to be a serious problem if you just, take and attach it to your belt. No, you have to roll up the safety mechanism before you fire. And there are some stills from the original series where you can see that that's what they are doing. And the original design is very, very clear. I've seen them. Very clear about what's supposed to happen with those phasers. So I think if you took that a step further in terms of what he was intending, I think you would see that phaser as part of the front part of a rifle. Anyway, all off on that. It doesn't matter. The phaser they're using here, the phaser rifle they're using here is great. I don't know where it originated exactly, but we see the same design in a lot of fan films. Special effects here, could not find a picture of him, are by Michael Bednar, who is the, let me see. Oh, okay. Let me look here. I'm sorry, I'm getting mixed around here. There are some special effects. Again, I mentioned Michael Bednar did the miniatures, whatever that comes into. The Klingon weapon design assistance is attributed to Kenny Mitchell. I don't know what he did. His IMDb is 2007. 2 visual effects credits for Starship Farragut. I don't know exactly where that comes in, but it doesn't, if he helped out with those Klingon weapons, they looked perfect. They look exactly like the Klingon weapons look. The Klingon disruptors are perfect. The visual effects supervisor, the guy really responsible for all the very, very cool stuff we see in space and some of the stuff that we see, that mountain and things like that. are by Michael Struck, who is the principal of NeoFX. I could not find a good website for that anymore. I fear that that is gone. But his IMDb, oddly enough, is still 2005 through 2019 with 14 visual effects and just a boatload of fan films. He has done effects for just a ton of fan films. Go look at IMDb yourself. There are too many to list. His visual effects here are awesome. They are awesome. It is exactly like what we would expect the original series to be if you just had a little bit more tech. You know, we see different. It still falls into something of what I call that original series problem where they tend to see the ship from the same angles. But when you get into like the opening titles, you're seeing the ship from different angles. When you get into things like, the weapons being destroyed and all that, that's all really good. Even just, orbiting in space is really good. This is what we would expect out of Star Trek, the original series, only better because we have better tech today. Perfect. No problem. And again, he did special effects for a lot of different fan films. Larry says, in the cage, they use a parabolic dish-type weapon connected to the power of the Enterprise to blast through the elevator doors. Yeah, that they did. They didn't do anything else with just a giant phaser or something like that. They beamed down. I think what they're actually intending is to say is they actually disconnected one of the laser beams, because they had lasers back then. They actually disconnected one of the laser beams from the ship, beamed it down, and then were sending power down to that so that they could try to blow the thing away. I think that's what they were intending to show. Marshall says, yeah, that was a phaser cannon. It was a laser cannon back then. And I'm getting senile. Yeah, well, hey, happens to all of us. My daughter in psychology says you got to keep learning, which is certainly true when I am doing these reviews. I do a ton of research. And it's not like you don't keep learning, Marshall. Anybody in IT knows you can't sit still on your laurels. You've got to keep learning more and more and more. Wardrobe and costume and wardrobe department. Well, here we are with John Broughton again. As I say, blood, sweat, tears, whoever is there to do it. And the wardrobe is great. There are also a number of people who are listed as wardrobe and costumes. And again, the costumes are wonderful. I talked about that when I talked about John Broughton and his. The costumes are great. They look exactly like they're supposed to. I get a kick out of the fact that several women are wearing a tunic and pants rather than a mini skirt. And I explained before why that is. Sometimes you don't have the figure to support that. But we saw that uniform at least twice in the original series in passing. And I'm thrilled that they're using it here. We will see it in other fan films as well. And in one particular fan film where Exeter, the science officer and apparently second in command, wears a miniskirt a lot. Definitely can support that with her figure. But when she goes down and beams down to a planet that's kind of messed up, she changes into a tunic and pants like you would expect somebody to do. So here I like to see it quite a lot. I love that. Marshall says, yeah, but all the new stuff crowds out the Monty Python quotes. There's that. And then nice poster. Well, thank you very much. It's not my poster. It's one of theirs. They did that poster. So, yeah, good poster they did. The lead makeup artist on this is Amy McDonough. Her IMDb is 2007 to 2012 with one makeup department credit for 5 episodes of Starship Farragut. She has 2 actor credits, 3 for Starship Farragut and 2 for Starship Farragut, the animated series, in which she plays Doc Holly, the ship's doctor. She has 1 wardrobe and costume department credit for 2 episodes of Farragut, and 1 production manager credit for 2 episodes of Farragut, and 1 sound department credit for 2 episodes of Starship Farragut. Again, these are fans living out their dreams and pouring their blood, sweat, and tears into something they really love. and they are trying to make it as perfectly like the original series as possible, and they are very, very, very much succeeding. They're wonderful. Marshall says the poster is very reminiscent of the old pocket books Star Trek cover designs. I suppose it might be. I don't know. I tell you honestly, on this one, I was just looking for a high resolution poster. I was finding these very low res posters that I don't like to put up when I'm in 720p. So this one looked good. It was for the correct episode, and I think after this, it's only going to be a lot easier to find the posters that look that good. The makeup here is great. We have our Klingons, some of whom have darker colored skin, as they are supposed to. The humans are largely what I call practical makeup. That is, the makeup is there so that they look good under lighting. Sometimes they do tell you something about the character. You have to credit the makeup for Mike's hair, which, again, I mentioned, is telling you something about this character. That is something really good when you get into makeup and costuming. It is telling you something about this character. This is a character who doesn't really care about looking that great. She cares about getting her engineering stuff done right. So she's not coiffed up like Star Trek people generally are. So that's very cool. There were also a number of other people in makeup. I only call out, get back her name, Amy McDonough, because she is the supervisor. But there were lots of other people doing makeup. I don't know what that means. I mean, obviously, if you got that many people in a cast, and they did, between the people who were just extras, people who were being on the bridge, the Klingons, the Klingon extras, you're going to have a lot of makeup to do. So you're going to have people sitting in the chair and doing the makeup. Or sometimes the actor will be doing their own makeup in something like this. So they had a lot of people. And I don't know who to credit exactly. I would have to say basically they just had a lot of people to sit in the chair and do the makeups for them. So great on them. Great on them. Now, in terms of reception, there's also one other thing I should have mentioned when I came to the visual effects. This thing, right? You see in this episode a scout class vessel, as we saw in the Star Trek technical manual. You see Starbase 1. If you look closely at the very beginning, you see Starbase 1 as we saw in the technical manual. You see tugs as we saw in the technical manual. And they got permission to use them. They did this right. They went to the Franz Josef Schnabel, that's his last name in real life, estate, and they got their permission to use it. I bring this up because Star Trek Discovery used some of the same stuff, but did not get their permission. Those guys own those things. Star Trek Discovery, the one that's making money, did not bother to even ask for their permission. These guys did. They did the right thing, and it's right there in the credits. Good for you guys. Another one up on Discovery. And Discovery, you guys are such idiots. You're stealing that whole tardigrade thing. You have now stolen stuff from the technical manual that you never got any permission to do. Just more reason to call you STDs. Now, reception on this. Well, it's a little bit different than the reception I usually do. Often talk about Rotten Tomatoes. I talk about what the critics said. I talk about what, that isn't applicable here. This is a fan film. I will mention that another episode I'm going to review, I'm not sure if it's the next or the one after that. I think it's the next one. For Want of a Nail, won Best Fan Film Award at the Wrath of Khan, and that's Khan, C-O-N, Film Festival in 2008. This is clearly a very good fan film. You can see it just by looking at it. The blood, sweat, tears, creativity, and love of this series shows through in every single respect. It is a very good fan film. And again, the only thing that I would really criticize in terms of the acting is their voices. The voices tend to be pretty flat all the way through, as opposed to going up. When we see something exciting, oh my God, what's that? Or, Captain, I've got something very bad to tell you. That is the only thing that I really would criticize about their performances, is just it's a little flat. And you see that with novice actors. That is not unusual to have novice actors whose voices don't really go up and down very much. But, again, not criticizing that too much. These are fans living out their dreams. You want me for a fan film? I am there in a heartbeat. I do not know how good I would be, because it's been 30 years since I was an actor. More than 30 years. At least 35. Maybe closer to 40. And I don't know if that would help me at all under the circumstances. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. But I can't fault these guys too much. They are living their dreams. They are getting to do things that I would love to do. I would love to live out this dream. So I am not going to give them too much. And in any case, as I say, as they go along, they get better. And when Vic Mignogna is directing them, they totally break out. After the next episode, I am totally buying them all the way through. Larry says the technical manual isn't necessarily canon. It was created by the author, not Gene Roddenberry or his company, which is why it is owned by Franz Joseph's heirs. And these guys got the permission. Discovery did not. Discovery did not even ask for permission. They just took it. The show making the money just stole it. And the show that isn't making any money asked. They did the right thing. So that's basically the end of this review. It's not going to be the longest review in the world, although I do have some commentary. We can ask ourselves at the end of this, is it any good? Yes, absolutely. I would definitely suggest watching this one. And if you think the actors, if you sometimes, just remember, they are living out their dreams. They are putting everything into this beyond just what you see on the screen. Most of them on the screen are working behind the scenes as well. They are blood, sweat, and tears to make some of this episode come out. And with the budget they had, they did great. One of the things I have to mention, I'm not about the effects, and I didn't. I should have mentioned. When they go through that cloaking device, and everything turns a little bit grayer, and their voices are a little bit different, I thought that was a great use of it. It's small, it's minor, you don't have to kill yourself doing it. The sound's probably a little bit. I'm familiar with how those sound stuff works, so I'm a little bit with that. But you don't have to kill yourself, and it still looks great. The only thing in terms of the production design that I would criticize is, and this may just be where budget comes, I'm sure it is, it's where budget comes into consideration, is the Klingon sets are a little cramped. But again, blood, sweat, tears, small amount of budget, sometimes you have to cut corners. You hate doing it, but with a indie film, doesn't matter what indie film it is, sometimes you have to make concessions for the fact that you don't have a lot of money. Larry says, CBS thought they were big enough to steal what they wanted. Yes, and they're currently being sued. And I hope that the suit is completely, I hope they get all the money they can. I hope they get all the money they can. Partly that's because I hate STD, and partly because I now know enough about that game to know that, yes, STD stole it. There is no way that they could be that close to that game. Just no way. Okay, that is my review. Watch this. Watch this episode. Watch the next one. Watch all of them. They're going to get better and better and better as they go along, and it is a great series. It is really a great series. So watch it. So, I do have some commentary. Oh my God. I'm amazed that I have to talk about this. Right now, there's a controversy over a Native American who walked up to a kid who was waiting for a bus. And I won't go through all this. You may have seen the stuff. And a Native American guy walks up to him and starts pounding a drum at him. And there's been all of this controversy about the kid because he's wearing a MAGA hat. And oh God, do the press hate the MAGA hats, right? So they've been coming down on this kid. The thing is, if you watch the full footage and not just a little tiny piece that they show you, you discover that this kid was damned near accosted by this guy. And I'm not going to give their names. I'm not going to give their names here because I don't want the teenager doxxed. On Twitter, they're already trying to get him doxxed. They probably have succeeded. There's one thread that I watched today because as a result of this, I've been pushing one of my videos, and I know I have at least one new subscriber because of it, and that video is now moving up to about 100. It's about to top the 100 mark because of the pushing I did today. Because, and now that may sound like a nothing to you, but I'm telling you 100 views on one of my videos is roughly double than most of the other things I get. Some of them are even down in the teens or less. So for me to get 100 views is great. These idiots, you know, thought so many of these ignorant activists are in the process of destroying people's lives. There was one thread that I read that was the sister of one of these kids, and she had her wedding like the day after it happened. And all that happened was constant phone calls, constant death threats. You know, they're doxing these people for no reason. The whole thing is entirely baseless. And I won't go into specifics because I don't want to have that argument. I don't want to have that argument. I know it was baseless. I watched it. All of this is baseless. All of these people who are trying to dox these poor teenaged kids, you're scumbags. I just want you to know that. What I suggest you do, because the secondary motto of this show that scrolls past in my lower third is, nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. The press is entirely behind how bad this is getting. Some of them have retracted it, but who cares? Who cares? They're not retracting it with the same level of passion that they put it out in the first place, so nobody's seeing it. You know, that's how the press works. If they're going to retract something, they do it very quietly. So if you want to see, I would ask you, frankly, to push that video that I've called "Nothing You See in the Press is Real." Nothing. Because that tells you everything that you need to know about why this is happening. You know, it's not my most popular, it's my most popular video now. And I would ask you to push it because nothing that you see in the press is real. Nothing. And, you know, I want to push it for a damn good reason because in that video, I walk through my methods of debunking any press story whatsoever because literally none of it is factually accurate. Even if they're doing a story about getting a cat out of the tree 2 blocks down from you, trust me, they fracked up the facts somewhere. They are incompetent at best. Again, I'd ask you to promote the video on social media. I did it for several hours today because I think it's important to get the word out. I have been debunking the press for about 30 years now. I can now debunk almost any story inside a half hour. I can prove one of 3 things. It never happened, it didn't happen the way it was reported, or if you strip off all the emotionally loaded language and propaganda, outright propaganda. I hate when the president uses fake news. It's not fake news, it's outright propaganda. And when you strip it all out, the facts devolve to a few sentences at best. Larry, Supercruise63 says the press is the main reason we have so much division in this country. I am firmly convinced at this point that the press is actively agitating for a civil war. And I have a video. I haven't recorded it yet, but I've got it written down and it's just waiting. I have been for months this close to dropping a video, and I'll tell you what it says in brief. If we're preparing for civil war, the people in my part of the country who make the food for the world and for everyone, stop feeding them. Turn off the spigot until both combatants put down their weapons and go home. Starve them out. And that means, if it means letting the cities burn, if it means people dying because they don't have any food or water, fine. Because that's a better option than a civil war. A civil war would kill far more people. And I have it all written out. It will be dropping. If we get that close, it's going to drop. And I think they're actively agitating for it. Because nothing you see in the press is real. These are modern press, are the intellectual heirs of William Randolph Hearst. And if you don't know who he is, go Google him, go look him up on Wikipedia. He is a man. He was one of the first media magnates in the late 18th century, 19th century, early 20th, and was in some measure responsible for starting the Spanish-American War. He was a propagandist of the lowest order, and today's journalists are no better. They have never been any better. They are his intellectual heirs. You need to judge events based on what you have personally witnessed. Literally, everything else that you see out of your press, assume it to be wrong, because it is. Nothing that you see in the press is real. Absolutely nothing. And they are, in my opinion, agitating actively for a civil war. And what bugged me too about it, right, is they're going all ape crap about this guy who's a Native American and how he's accosted and all that. Some of the stuff I put out on social media, and it's only Twitter. I hate using Twitter. I only use Twitter for marketing purposes. That's why I was pushing this video. I would find anybody who was either negative about it or positive about it, and I would put it in, and I just said, I would beg you to watch this video, because I have been debunking these guys for 30 years, and I'm going to show you in this video how it's done. And that's how I got 100 views on it and an additional subscriber or two to my channel. What bugs me about this is, if you really cared about Native Americans and how they're treated, you would give a crap about this. I've said this before. I've had it up before. This is modern day life on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Everything you see in here is real. These people are absolutely poor. It is a national disgrace that this is allowed to continue, and has for 100 years. Every 4 years, some presidential candidate wanders down there, mouths words about how they're going to make it better, and then they leave and they're never seen again. And they know it. It's been going on for 100 years. They know it. I've said before, you know, that baby that you see there, that baby is being bathed in a tub that has been used for 1 million other purposes. The garbage you see out there is not because they can't be bothered to pick it up. It's because all of that stuff is going to be used, reused, reused, and reused over generations. And they can't afford to get rid of it. And that outhouse is real. They use outhouses. They live in tin shanties. They live sometimes in old mobile homes that don't have any insulation, in the 110-degree heat that they get during the summer, and the negative 20-degree wind chill with 2 feet of snow that they get in the winter. If you are worried about Native Americans, don't worry about this guy who's bound, go up around at the Capitol pounding a drum. Worry about these people. You know, if you don't care about these guys, then you just don't care. You are virtue signaling, and that is all. Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. Again, if they're doing a story about getting a cat out of a tree 2 blocks down, trust me, they fracked up the facts somewhere along the line. They are either lazy, or in the case of like Donald Trump, they are intentionally attempting to agitate for civil war. And if you guys do that, if you make it, is going to make it my friggin' mission to get the people in my part of the country to turn off the spigot and let you starve. It'll only take 4 days. It'll only take 4 days. I've gone without food for 4 days. The third day you start to feel kind of sick. The fourth day you start to feel kind of desperate. You'd see food riots and flames in the cities. I will make it my mission for that to happen. Nothing you see in the press is real. Do not believe it. Do not allow them to agitate this country into a civil war. Civil war would be bad for everybody, which is why starving out the cities would be a much better alternative. Okay, off my soapbox. Oh, let's see if I can do a little bit of ad copy, as always, in the immortal style of Ernie Anderson. Larry Larry says, my video about the press is almost 1 year old. Yes, it is, but it is timeless. It is utterly timeless. It was true 100 years ago, and it will be true 100 years from now. Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. So, my ad copy in the immortal style of Ernie Anderson. Now, I tried to do this, and I figured out the best way to do it is start out like, do a little warm-up thing. In a world ruled by madness. Okay, here we go. This Friday, on Tales from SYL Ranch, the Orville makes first contact. Now, a new crew member joins the ship. That's this Friday on the Fandi Masters review of the Orville Season 1, 2, Episode 5. All the world is a birthday cake. And as an aside, Fox, if you can get me some better synopses or ad copy, that would be great, because these are boring as hell. Then, next Monday, on Tales from SYL Ranch, a film crew goes to a tropical island for an exotic location shoot and discovers a colossal ape who takes a shine to their female blonde star. Now he is captured and brought back to New York City for public exhibition. That's next Monday on the Fandi Masters Retro Review of 1933's King Kong. And as always, my schedule is Mondays and Fridays here on YouTube at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Pacific. And if you're working off of UTC, that will be 2 a.m. the following morning. In terms of upcoming reviews, there is a schedule on my website, www.wrstone.com. If you click on the schedule link, you will see a calendar there. And if you click on any individual calendar item, I will usually attempt to, find a place where you can watch this for free. However, as someone who was in IT for 40 years, man and boy, I must insist that you always use effective ad blockers when on the internet. My favorite is uBlock Origin. That's the letter U, B-L-O-C-K. You can find it in your browser's add-on repository. Larry Larry says, I think Fay Ray was a real brunette. I don't know. I will check that out for next week. I will see. I don't know. Again, every Friday I'm doing a mini review of the Orville until the season is over. And then after King Kong on February 4th, First Man into Space. February 11th, The Cosmic Man. February 18th, I'm back to Starship Farragut for Want of a Nail, which is the one that won the award. And then February 25th, a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. So at this point, I might ask something like this.
Say, pardon me, but could you help out a fellow American who's down on his luck? Hit the road!
So if you like what I'm doing, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell so you always know when I'm going live, and tell all of your friends, family, neighbors, pets, and their livestock to do the same. You can contribute to my PayPal tip jar, which is below, and if you visit my website, you will see things like my Amazon wish list. I am now reinvestigating Subscribestar. It will be totally dependent on what their payout amounts are, and I have not yet figured that out. If their payouts are immediate, then I will then use Subscribestar as a crowdfunding. If it stayed the way it had before, with only payouts at every $150, that means I'd wait months, given the amount of donations I get, and it's kind of useless. But if they've changed that, then I will be going to Subscribestar. Yet I have not. But you can see my Amazon wish list. The biggest thing is a laptop that will make all of my technical problems instantly disappear, and hopefully I would be able to come at you at a rather normal 24 to 30 frames per second instead of the measly 10 frames per second I'm doing now. All of the money that you contribute to me all goes toward that laptop so that I can buy it. It gets cheaper and cheaper over time. I do not need a top model laptop. This one was at one time top model. It now is not. It's gotten cheaper by at least $600. So I need that laptop. I do not need one that's that top of the line. This one is perfectly fine. If you want to buy the laptop for me outright, which I never expect anybody to do, you can become my program director. You tell me exactly what to review, when to review it, what time, where, and everything. You become the program director. And you can see all of this at my website, www.wrstone.com. As always, I must thank my viewers who have contributed. I am using one of their contributions already inside of my studio to make my production values a little bit better. And again, on the financial side, everything is accrued until I can buy my Amazon wish list. Must always thank those of you who have supported me and are supporting me. I wish I could figure out a way to say it differently so I wasn't saying it the same way every single week. But I get a kick out of it because A, that somebody would think my opinions are worth anything, and B, because I do have a certain level of showmanship going on here. I am not playing a character like a lot of YouTubers are. But I do have some amount of showmanship on here. It takes me back to my acting days, and I get an ego boost out of it. So that is all the time that we have today, boys and girls. So tune in again on Friday for my review of the Orville Season 2, Episode 5. Until then, this is Tales from SYL Ranch, the vlogcast that reminds you to always know where your towel is. And I'm your host, Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.